Let's start off. If you could, and you prepared for this one, if you could put the metaverse in 2 or 3 words, what would they be? Who wants to go first?
Yeah, sure. That was good. 2 or 3 words? 2 or 3 words.
And please use the mic so the stream can hear you.
2 or 3 words. Well, I would say the imagination exteriorized and then inhabited by multiple people.
You can be who you want to be.
I think a decentralized, interoperable future.
Right, so now I have to pick one of those buzzwords that nobody picked, right?
NFTs.
Right. I'm thinking it's creator driven. That's one. Second is I think it's about humans. And the third one, I don't know. I will stick with 2.
Think about it.
Yeah.
It's interesting because we already see so many different answers, right? And you know the funny thing is, if I ask any of you, you probably give a different answer altogether again. So here's my first question to the panel. How are we going to make sure that we're all going to get on the same page when it comes to the metaverse?
Shall I just start? So I think that we heard like a vision, and I think what we're doing is we share quite a similar vision. But we have to build the first step, and that's why we try to connect, I guess, the real world with the virtual world or whatever you want to call it. And that also means that it's a baby step. But we also have to realize that for a lot of people, it's a big step. And I think that most of our work is evolved around how we can actually activate new people and bring them into, say, our world in a non-threatening and in to create like a symbiotic relationship. And I think that that's the thing that we focus on.
Yeah, I think it's mostly going to be focused around revenue models that are shared and decentralized. So what I mean,
we call it Mr. Reach, by the way.
Yeah. What I mean with that is we have the NFTs, and the NFTs they center around utility, around value, and those NFTs they're also decentralized. So that means that you can have a multitude of companies building value for a token that is on a decentralized network. And that is also going to likely inspire a lot of innovation, a lot of community building into that direction, where multiple companies are building value for a single NFT. An example would be, for example, you have a blockchain building the infrastructure. You have a company that's selling stuff on that infrastructure. You have company A that is creating this voice tag associated to this NFT. You have company B that's creating an avatar that is also connected to that same NFT. And you have a third company that's marketing the NFT. And all of the revenue sharing is basically handled in the smart contract. So that way you can basically think of new ways of building partnerships on the blockchain via those NFTs, via those virtual products.
Okay, so I'm in this space all the time, every day, right? And I had trouble following that. Did all of you catch that? Be honest. You all understood. So I'm the dumb person here. Okay. No, cool. All right, cool. Thank you, Jorrit, for that. So Nick, what do you think?
So I think there's no one answer because we are in a decentralized world. I see it like a swarm of birds. Only the people at the edge, only the birds at the edge knows where it's going, but that changes in 5 seconds. The swarm goes in a different direction. So the fact that there is no one voice to say, hey, we are going this way. I think that's why we believe that we need to hold to some fundamental principles and then build on it. And look, even the emergence of DAOs means that you're going to distribute
Everybody know what a DAO is? Who doesn't know what a DAO is? Okay, see
It's a decentralized autonomous organization. So it means that you decentralize, you don't have one CEO, you decentralize everything and it's all votes. Whether this experiment will succeed or everything will crash in 2 years, we still have to see. But the emergence of it shows that this is what people want, at least ideas around this. Maybe DAOs doesn't work, something else will work. But the principles of it is decentralizing that, where are we going? So nobody has an answer.
I love that answer. And I don't know if Jason wants to add anything to it, but...
The question was, how do we make sure that we have consensus about what this metaverse looks like or is like?
How do we get everybody on board?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, I'm always going to sort of default to the role of the storyteller and the artist. There's a great line by Marshall McLuhan. He said, it's always been the artist who realizes that the future is the present and uses his work to prepare the grounds for it. So, like, in some ways, unifying narratives are necessary for any kind of like consensus, moral consensus, any way we govern ourselves. I mean, I think that the truth crisis created by somebody like Trump, was so destabilizing and almost like schizophrenic inducing, because all of a sudden we didn't have unifying narratives anymore. The sort of unifying narrative of liberal democracy forged after World War II, that made Francis Fukuyama call it the end of history, that's it. Like, we have this unifying narrative that works, and it's like civil rights, and it's voting, and it's democracy, and it's free trade, and it's like making open borders, and it was like, oh, this is working, But then, like, all of a sudden, these nefarious agents on social media can acquire narrative destructing agency, and the fracturing of narratives can create a kind of insanity that, if acted out upon, is what happened in January 6th in the U.S. Capitol. And so, I think we need narratives for the future, because these disruptive technologies will lead to all kinds of new competing agendas about how they can be used or should be used or might be used. And so it's just more important than ever, I think, to have articulate, eloquent, inspirational leadership and narrative. And like, I just remember, you can agree with him or not agree with some of his political actions, Obama, for example, but that guy was like Martin Luther King. I mean, he was the embodiment of inspirational narrative, like the gospel of telling a story and inspiring a crowd. And I just think societies are unified by story. We're storytelling animals. And so I think the story of the metaverse is what will determine what the metaverse becomes.
Thank you. Now, for people like you, me, Jason, and probably for everybody on this panel and many people here in the room, this is an aspiration. It's an inspirational dream. We see a future far ahead in the future. This week I was on the radio at BNR Digital, and I actually said something along the lines of, I see a world where there's no more capitalism. And then Alex, is Alex still here? He said, oh man, I was listening to the show and I loved it, and then he said that, and I was like, oh. And it's not that he doesn't want to believe that, but it really shows that what we envision is so far from what most people believe, is realistic. So what's going to happen in the next, year, 2 years, and what are people going to feel from that? How is it going to impact their lives? How are we going to make the first step towards this aspirational future?
So I think one thing that's really going to change, we're already seeing that, especially the change from organizations in a typical structure, so top down with a CEO, with people involved as well, to more like communities that are more bound by stories rather than a profit and loss. So that way you get a very different kind of creating value, because then the value doesn't really rely that much on logistics or supply chains, but it relies more on creativity and what you can build with the tools that you have available at hand, where everything is already immediate and around you. So I think that's basically going to change. And that's also what we are seeing in our company, is that we are basically doing like this inverse company setup, where we start off basically with a token, with a lot of tokens currently stored in a foundation, and we are distributing that to the community, gradually building value, gradually. And at some point, the organization is just going to be the content builder of the future. But the project itself, the platform itself, is in hands of the community and it's self-sustainable. It's also led basically by a organization around that is perfectly also modeled for that community. And this is also currently something that Alex and Mira are working on. But it's still a lot of work because you also have to involve lawyers and the whole notary system. You have to go into like legal battles likely at some point. So that's going to be very, very interesting. At the same time, we have the European Union, of course, also coming out with the new laws regarding, at the one hand, privacy and protection of data, but on the other hand, also requiring you to upload your passport whenever you want to do a transaction with crypto. So there's a little bit of a conflict over there. So it will be very interesting to see how the European Union will be able to deal with all of these communities, with these tribes evolving. So I see a lot of good. I think one of the bad things is you will also get a lot of tribalism out of that because now it's not only the founders competing with each other, but it's communities competing with each other, which can in a way also be a lot more scary. So for that we also have to create the proper narratives and create the proper stories to also deal with that. So that's it.
Thank you. I hear tribalism, I hear emotions. I go back to the initial question, what are people gonna initially feel and experience in the metaverse space? Christiaan, you wanna take that one?
Yeah, so I think for me, it's about transparency. So funny enough, I think when people look at crypto, or at least when banks look at crypto, they have this idea that it's all about dodgy money and people trying to hide stuff, and maybe to a certain extent for tax authorities that actually is the case. But I think that the amount of transparency that you can find if you are able to read, for example, a smart contract, or if you understand what sits on the blockchain, I think that is actually mind-boggling. So you see it now with NFT projects. Like before, you had no idea who was behind it. At the moment, if you're not a project where the team is doxed, meaning you know exactly who's behind it, then the project doesn't fly. If you want to work with market makers, the amount of KYC that I have to go through is that I don't. Well, the only thing I don't have to share is the color of my underwear, and everything else I have to share. So I think you see a lot of professionalism entering the space, but I think it's completely based on transparency, which I personally think is an amazing, great thing, because show everybody how much money you're making, what's the percentage, what goes down to the person, like to the creator, what makes how much is the percentage of the middleman. I think we all know the story of Meta announcing, I think they're going to charge 40 to 50% on an NFT transaction.
Thank you, Zuckerberg.
I think the general consensus in the industry was like amazing news, great, thank you. OpenSea takes 2.5%, but I think the transparency part, I think is a great thing, but I think there's also a lot of people who will struggle with it because there's a lot of people who have this role in the middle, and now suddenly you have to explain what value do you add. So I think the transparency and the added value part, for me, that's what's the coming year is all about.
Thank you. Jeroen, how's chat doing? Any updates from there? Chat, you out there?
There is. There are a couple of questions actually.
Okay.
I got 3 now. One from Guy, and Guy asked, is there already a game published that represents the metaverse?
Is there already a game published that represents the metaverse?
Yep, that's correct. I like that question.
Anybody want to take that one?
You think Star Atlas?
Star Atlas, but Star Atlas isn't done yet.
So my question would be back, would that be like a meta game? A game about the metaverse, or would it be a game that is structured like a metaverse?
I say Guy, please clarify the question, and while we wait for that, let's ask the audience if there's any other questions.
I think I might be wrong, but just going to throw an answer out there. So Sandbox to me feels like a user-generated games. So season 1, season 2, they open up and close, so you can go in there and build mini games. So unlike Decentraland, Sandbox is about users coming to make mini games in there. So that's the closest I can think of.
Yeah, but Sandbox, I mean, from where I'm sitting, it's just another game, except in this case, it's built on a blockchain, yet it's not interoperable with anything yet. I know the Sandbox people probably hate me. You can bring stuff in, but that's not really what interoperability is, right? Interoperability infers in and out. It's just not just one way.
So I think the paradox is that you have game on the left side and you have metaverse on this side. So how could a game resemble something? How could an apple resemble an orange, right? So that is really the question. So that's why I'm also wondering, okay, is this a game that kind of resembles it in a way, and then Star Atlas can come close, because Star Atlas is a game, it's about the future, it's about interconnected experiences. That could be a way, the Sandbox could be one. But how we see the metaverse on the other side, we don't say it's not a game, it's an infrastructure, it's an ecosystem around it. So in practice, that means that the metaverse is a blank canvas. It's just a set of tools, and it's basically created by companies, by communities, by creators, however they would like to have it work, and they can also deploy it on their own channels, on their own website, so that it doesn't require. So let's say Nick here tries to or creates a game about a pet, and this game, then he wants to Tamagotchi, and he wants to deploy Tamagotchi. He wants to put it on his own website. But that's currently not the case with even Star Atlas, where you can really put that experience on your own channels. So for us, that's really the difference between a game and a metaverse.
Maybe with these gentlemen.
Go on. Are we going to make it game, Jason?
I mean, I'm open to the possibility. I mean, look, I had an experience with immersive theater that, again, in the analog realm, but it hinted subjectively at what I hope virtual reality, fully immersive games feel like, which is cinematic, fully immersive, but with agency. If you guys are familiar with a company called Punch Drunk, so they did in New York City, they're famous for their immersive theater, Sleep No More, which was kind of like Hitchcock meets Macbeth, Shakespeare's Macbeth. And it was a 5-story giant building, fully choreographed to feel like you're inside of this strange Hitchcockian story with sound design even that follows you around.
Birds?
All the audience wears masks, so you become a ghost, and all the other audience members also blend into the dramatic element. And then the actual actors kind of pop in and out of different scenes, and you can follow them through the halls, or you can go your own way, choose your own adventure. But the atmospherics are so profound. The cinematic kind of haunted house meets mystery theater meets watching a movie that you're in was intoxicating, super psychedelic, and it just, the guy talks about it like the moment when baseline reality falls away and a new reality is emerging that's pixelating wake, or like a reverse dolly shot in a movie where it goes, like it just felt other. I was transported. So if we can make a metaverse game, like again, I'm always going to, my expectations are high, but if we can make a metaverse game that gives that feeling, that would be awesome. So I'd love to be part of that.
So
Sorry. Gotta keep a little control here. If you let you guys get out of control,
I have a question.
See, that's what I want. Please, go ahead. Please tell us who you are and what your question is.
My name is Sandra, and I have a question coming more from the consciousness side of self. I'm not so immersed in the whole technical background of things. I find it super interesting and intriguing. I think everybody has to know where we're moving, but ultimately it's the self-empowerment that I'm looking for. And I'm seeing that especially a lot of young people are lost in this world. And with the continuous overwhelm of that influence, where do you think, like especially you, Jason, where do you think that's going? Mental health.
Yeah.
Oh,
Thank you. Well, I absolutely, I'm with you. I mean, and that's why, some people might think it's strange that I lecture both about technology and also consciousness and mental health, but I think they're inextricably bound. Because I think it was Stephen Johnson, he said, our thoughts shape our spaces and our spaces return the favor. Or we build the tools and the tools build us. And so no doubt the state of our consciousness determines the things we make and use with our consciousness, and then the things we make and use in turn affect our consciousness. So that's a feedback loop that's happening. And I think
inception right there.
Yeah. The mental health epidemic today is real. There's more people dying by suicide than from natural disasters and armed conflict combined, according to the World Health Organization. So if people are taking their lives, and if it's a threat of death from suicide is the biggest danger we have now, then the question then becomes, well, okay, so everything we do in our society needs to be measured against what its effects are on mental health. Cities. One of the reasons I love Amsterdam so much is because you can bike everywhere. That has an incredible boost in my mental health. Than a city where I'm sitting on the fucking subway, crowded, looking at other dead souls in metal coffins. There is a way of designing urban infrastructure that promotes mental health. And no doubt, I think immersive environments can be designed or should be designed to also stimulate and encourage our mental well-being. We know that there's, I guess you could call it best practices and usage protocols that can determine whether your experience on Instagram is uplifting or whether it causes body dysmorphia, whether, going on TikTok for 20 minutes, brings you some laughter and joy, or whether it gives you Tourette's syndrome. Some people are getting tics, literally, they're picking them up from using TikTok. And so, for better or worse, the conversation has to be had. Like, what is the role that this tool, that this mediated environment, that this technology is going to have on our lived experience? And, the only technologies that interest me are the ones that expand and stimulate and uplift the human spirit. That's it. Like, I like films because they can take me to worlds that expand me. They are psychedelic trips from which I am transformed. And so that's what I want all technologies that I interface with to do to me, and that's very important. I agree with you.
To speak to the sense of self, but when that sense of self is not even present, which I see in a lot of young people, and not only young people, there's a lot of older lost people out there too.
Yeah, no doubt.
But if that sense of self is not there, then that could easily be, just another pill,
Oh yeah. There are technologies that can act as like pacifiers. It's like sucking on a pacifier to just like numb out, no doubt. And there are technologies that can challenge, that can expand, that can stimulate, that can unleash, and those are the ones that interest me.
Any other questions? I see that Gijs is raising a hand. Any other questions on that side?
Yes, there's a lady there.
There's a lady over there. Yes. Okay. So, ladies first, Gijs. I'm sorry.
Thank you all for great talks. I'm having a great day today, and I myself, my name is Natalia. I myself, I'm a neuroscientist. Spent 8 years on brain research, and I also have a question for Jason and the gang, of course. Your talk greatly showed us what are the opportunities that Metaverse gives us as humans, and that's really amazing. But one thing that always worries me is that the way we grow as humans is by facing struggle, right? Like in the real world, we experience a lot of inconvenience. The real world is not pretty always. It's not always convenient, and Metaverse is in a way, right? So my worry is like what happens to us. Like from evolutionary standpoint, like how can this process of emerging into Metaverse affect us as humans. And you're a futurist, I think a great one. So I'm very curious about your opinion here.
I'm gonna try to answer that. So we are shaped by our experiences. You definitely know that. So to say that metaverse is about the pretty things, that's not true. Actually, a component of metaverse, which is VR, is very much used today in training for different circumstances, training how people react. And there's a lot of data that people who's been through that training actually reacts better. So if you borrow that idea and you extend it to building a metaverse, you could actually simulate positive reinforcements. Of course, other people could also do it to put people down. So that's why at the end of the day, it is, as Jason said, the narrators who will who will shape the narration. Do we build nasty things, or do we build not necessarily pretty, but the kind of experience that will help our children grow, will help ourselves grow? If you're feeling depressed and lost, taking control of a storyline and having that storyline roll out the way you want it for an hour could be very fulfilling. And also,
there's actually this really interesting series. It's not Black Mirror, but there's an episode where a person gets lost. They're not sure whether they're the narrative or the physical person. It's very interesting, and eventually they have to make a choice. Are we going to go back to what I think this is a physical world, or am I going to stay in what I want to be the physical world?
It sounds like the never-ending story, man. That's what I loved about that movie when I was growing up.
Yeah. Jeroen, wasn't there a question in chat as well that's on this topic? Could you please enlighten us?
Well, you have to say first hi to the camera.
Oh, hi.
So, yeah.
Hi, Roggels. Yes, his name is Roggels. He's a very loyal community member.
Exactly, yeah. And he has also a question, which is, who will be responsible for a clean metaverse? A clean
metaverse. Clean.
Yeah, not cleaning, not cleaning, but just he says...
Are people already littering the metaverse? Is this really happening?
I guess so, yeah. But another question he asked... Another question he asked was, when there is a metaverse, who can and will control it?
Oh, who wants to take that one? Jorrit? Jorrit can take that one.
Sure.
Mr. Reach.
I think the last question is actually the easiest one to answer, because that's, of course, we're in this Web3 revolution, so we're talking about decentralization, blockchain, so communities will be the answer. But I find the other question actually a lot more interesting, about who is going to clean the metaverse. Because what you're seeing right now, VRChat is the biggest metaverse out there. And VRChat, I don't know who of you ever been to VRChat, but it's one mega meme world. So basically, you encounter different kind of cartoon characters, aliens, different species, all over the place. And there's nobody cleaning it. And that's also the charm of that world. And apparently, it attracts a lot of people to go into that world, to express themselves, because they can be dirty in that world, whereas in this world, you have to be clean. So there is also like a psychological component associated to the metaverse, where people actually express themselves quite differently in there than in the meat world, basically.
If I can jump in there, because I actually read the questions on the chat, and
Sure.
One of them was the clean. They also referred to something that we just heard as well. It's like, what are we going to do with the dark side? The dark side. I mean, I know that nobody really wants to talk about this. This is a very cringy topic, but let's say that we build your open metaverse, right? And a group of pedophiles decide to build their own virtual experience. How do we feel about that? What do we think about that? What and even should be doing about that?
So this is a very hard question, but this is also a topic that we have discussed at length, because how are you going to create a system that governs itself and not be completely filled with pedophiles and weird people that creep up on you?
Oh, there's a lot of weird people here. There's nothing wrong with weird people.
Okay, so weird people's fine. But that's the question, right? So what is the edge between being just weird and being extremely weird, like intolerable weird?
Exploiting children.
Exploiting children, that kind of level, or like Yeah.
Where's the limit?
So
Where's the boundary?
where's the limit? So we did create a structure. I'm not saying it's going to be perfect, but it relies on. So it's basically based on the impossible triangle, the Penrose triangle, where one group of people basically controls another group, which controls this one, which controls again, and that way you can create a self-sustaining loop of control within a community where the community is regulating itself. So that is going to be an experiment, and that's also, I think, the nice thing about the metaverse, where you can do those experiments, because if it doesn't work out, you can alter it and you can change it. One of our values of your Open Metaverse, and I'm not going to really spoil it because we have one expert at that with very nice discussions around it, which is you go ahead.
Oh, it's me?
Yeah.
Oh, anti-fragility?
Exactly.
That's the word you want me to use?
Yes.
So who here loves the word anti-fragile? Thank you. You guys, you're always welcome. No, anti-fragility, yes. So a wonderful thing about the metaverse, a wonderful thing about what we're trying to build, a wonderful aspect of blockchain is that it has at least the potential to be anti-fragile. And that is important because, for example, if we go back and we ask the question, why didn't peer-to-peer networking, why didn't decentralization take off 10, 15 years ago with the rise of Skype and Napster, then the answer is right there. It was a lack of anti-fragility, right? And for those of you that don't know that word, go and look it up because it's a really good word. And it really encapsulates the true potential of why this is the right moment and how we're going to deal with that. I was on the radio this week, like I said before, BNR Digital, and they asked me the question, so who's going to moderate the metaverse? Which I think is actually the question, who's going to clean it, right? And that's the beauty of blockchain technology. You can build it in such a way that people that actually live and breathe the rules and regulations that we all have agreed upon through consensus, and if they make an effort to hold everybody to that standard, they can get rewarded. So we're not dependent on people being completely selfish, completely, unrewarded for doing the hard things in life. We now have a technology that allows us to reward those people that do the hard thing to help us all be better and be what we perhaps should be. Is that the answer you were looking for? Cool. I had a question for you, but he completely threw me off. Oh yeah, so let's take a moment to step away from the dark side of the web. Let's take a moment to step away from the truly, inspirational, spiritual future. Or maybe not. You guys, you're doing something really cool with all these Asian, they're called the 12, 13? I forgot. 12. But I've been dying to ask you, can you tell us a little bit about why you decided to do that?
Yeah, so the 12 is inspired by the Asian zodiac. So my two co-founders are both from China. So I guess the reference comes from their book and their part of the world. And I think it represents something that goes beyond just an idea. It's ingrained. It's about DNA. It's about identity. And I think maybe what you described about empowerment is about self. And I think that when you were explaining about a game or like the theater example and the truly immersive part of it, I think what we're trying to do is we're trying to use part digital world, part real world, part metaverse, whatever you want to call it, as different stages to tell one story on. And that's what we're trying to do with the 12. So I don't know if we can say that we are doing that. At least we're trying. So in our case, the game consists of the community being able to contribute to the storyline. It's a way for the community to go on a quest and find all the information. For example, they have to go into Sandbox to find some part of the story. If you don't go in there, you don't know what that part of the storyline looks like. So we're trying to, but we have to face the reality that a lot of people are still on social media. So you have to go to Twitter to find some of the information. You have to go to the website of some of the characters. So every character in the story, they might have their own website, their own Twitter account. They have a role in Discord. So I think it's a truly immersive, interactive experience that we are trying to develop. So the way how we look at a game is not create a closed environment where everything takes place. Now we're using every type of infrastructure that is around to tell the story and to put a narrative out there. So the 12 is just I guess something that goes a little bit deeper than just an idea. And then we've created it into a sci-fi story. So we call it the Asian Zodiac Retold, which is quite an interesting experience for Asians or for the Chinese, because they look at the zodiacs that they're very familiar with, and we try to give it a completely different context. And obviously we have an ambition. We want to be the new Marvel, and what kind of narrative you want to use, right? But I think what we really trying to do here is we have an opportunity to give a part of the world, which I personally think is where the real future of a lot of the initiatives around the metaverse really sits, to identify with, in this case, a new fandom, and be proud about it. And I think a lot of the technology in Web 2 has been very Anglo-Saxon dominated, and I think one of the things that we see now as a movement is a lot of kick-ass ideas and projects and companies are being started all over the world. I never realized that half of the community managers in the world in Discord are from Nigeria, for example, right?
We noticed that.
Yeah, for better or worse, maybe. But I think it doesn't really matter. I think what is quite fascinating, it doesn't really matter anymore. We have a community manager from Sri Lanka. He makes 3K a week. Wow. I think that's amazing. So what we're trying to do with the 12 is we're trying to create like this global story with a global group of like the community, where everybody can contribute in some shape or form and can benefit. But I think to maybe give my 10 cents of thought on the question about all these, like the dark side. I think I get this question a lot when I do these kinds of talks, and I find it really fascinating that people try to put like problems of society on something like the metaverse and say, now how are you gonna solve that? And I think people will be people, and for me, the people will be the same people in the real world as in the metaverse. So, if you're screwed up in the head, you're screwed up in the head. I think, and I think also, from my point of view, I'm not sitting here because I have this God syndrome where I think like, oh, I'm going to change that. Because I think that control part, I find it quite fascinating. Is for me, that's a very real life attitude on how you solve a problem. So when you're uncomfortable, the initial reaction of, I think, a human, but I guess you guys know this better than because you studied it, but I think the human reaction is, I want to take control. So I'm looking for the things that I know. I think we have to be, I guess, more open in how we talk about things, and I think we also have to accept the fact that the metaverse or whatever, at least what I'm doing, is never going to solve all the shit in the world. I'm just trying to add something prettier, and I think that's the stuff that we do, basically.
Thank you, Christiaan. Well, I feel quite inspired by that. I have to add, though, that Christiaan and I really think the metaverse is going to solve everything. I would like to thank the speakers on the panel. It's been an extremely engaging day. It's 4:45, and I told them to have the pizzas ready at 4:45. So, no. So I want to ask all of you, first of all, I want to have a great applause for everybody in the room for coming here. We couldn't have done it without you, because let's face it, if this room had been empty, it would have been useless. So thank you so much. I also want to have another applause for our amazing speakers today, our panel members, Daniel over there. And I would like to invite you all to continue the conversation at the bar, have a drink, have a beer, have a piece of pizza, fill yourself up, because although we're going into the virtual, we still are very physical, and I, for one, am super hungry. Thank you so much.